Good evening, everyone. I'll call this City of Port Colborne August 23rd Council meeting to order. At this time, we'll call on our WeeStream guy to bring up O Canada. Great, and we thank the McKay Choir once again. Council, there are no proclamations this evening. If I can have Councillors Danch and Bruno move the adoption of the agenda. Are there any questions with regards to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. I do not have any disclosures of interest this evening. Just to confirm, Council, are there any? Seeing none, thank you. Approval of the minutes. We have the regular meeting of Council from August 9th, 2021. All of Councillors Desmarais and Bodner move that. Are there any questions to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Items being pulled this evening: 7-1, 7-2, 7-3, 7-4, 7-5, 7-6, 7-7, 8-1, and 8-2. And there are no further items, Council, so I can't ask you if something hasn't been pulled to bring it. So there isn't anything there. So we have one presentation this evening. I'm going to call on the CAO to introduce Gilles Croteau from the Niagara region. Scott?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Steele. I'm hoping coming through okay. Through you to Council. This comes from a question that was actually emailed me to by a councillor, or actually more than one councillor, just looking for an update on the city's efforts around physician recruitment. You will recall in February, a recruitment guideline policy was approved by Council. City staff are constantly working on trying to bring doctors to our community. Our community is an underserved community in Ontario. We do have residents who are not rostered to a primary care physician. We also have to maintain, the comings and goings of the practitioners in the city. So from time to time, you do have a retirement or somebody who closes a practice, and those patients also need to be picked up through this process of attracting new physicians to Port Colborne. So because that question was asked, I did call on Gilles Croteau from the region, who is our physician recruiter for all of Niagara and Port Colborne, to come to Council and bring an update. And I hope that she has brought another person with her in terms of a good news story. So I will turn it over through you, the Mayor, to Gilles.
is Jill in yet? Jill's not in yet, Madam Deputy Clerk? Okay. We do have our doctor on this evening. So what I'm going to do, Council, is I'm going to go to delegations. Our delegation is here in the waiting room, Madam Clerk. Okay. I'll go to delegations in order to get Jill on. So our delegation this evening, Council, is Jane Hosian from McKeel Marine Limited. And they're requesting to receive an exemption from bylaw 89-2000 and receive a pass to park on West Street. Jane, if you want to bring Jane on. There she is. Good evening, Jane. How are you?
Good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So Jane, you and I did have a conversation today with regards to the parking issue, and I think we've come to a resolution which I think Council can support. I spoke to staff and they support it.
Okay, great.
Do you want me to lead with that? Is that all right, Jane, if that's okay?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Great, thank you. So members of Council, Jane and I spoke today with regards to the parking issue for the McKeel truck when they come to unload some equipment and their crew for the tug that's docked here in Port Colborne. So what we've done, Council, in the past is we do allow our pilots to park in the city parking lot. We have 4 designated spots for special permits, and I talked to Jane about this. There is a section, quite frankly, right in front of their tug right on West Street that's a crossed out zone because there is a crosswalk there where it would allow their truck to pull in, unload, and then their driver can take the truck, park in our city lot. It doesn't have to take up a parking spot that may or may not be there on West Street, depending on when they're called out, but there will always be a spot here at City Hall. So Jane said that would be fine with them. It's a block away, so it's not an undue burden to the company just to come down the street to the back of City Hall. So that's something we've come up with today. And again, McKeel has no issue with that. If Council wants to move ahead with that, if I can get a mover and a seconder to do that, I'd appreciate it. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bodner, are there any questions or comments for either Jane or myself or staff? Councillor Danch?
Yeah, thanks for that. Through you, is that like the McNeil boat on the wall on West Street? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, McKeel Marine. Yes, it's a tugboat.
That's how you say it, McKeel or McNeil?
No, it's McKeel. MCK.
And that's for like the green boat that's along the wall there.
That's correct.
Okay, I have no problems with that. Thank you.
Thanks. Any further questions on that, Council? Okay. So Jane, just before we take the vote, just so you know that we will get you the parking permit for your vehicle for the rear of City Hall, but there is a hashed out area that you can pull up, unload, and then go park. Is that agreeable then? Just make sure we get all this done before we vote on this.
Yep, that's absolutely perfect. I really appreciate you guys doing this for us.
Good, thank you, Jane. So no further questions, Council. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Thanks, Jane. We really appreciate you coming out tonight and being prepared to take questions, but I think we got it all settled today, which is a good thing. We like to work
Awesome.
love to work with our local businesses. Thank you so
much, Mayor Steele.
Good, thank you again. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to go back to our presentations. If the CAO can kind of start over again, Scott, because we do have Jill on the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure Jill didn't hear, but I gave a glowing introduction of you and the work that we're doing together since the policy was approved in February, and that we continue to try to service this underserved area by making sure unrostered patients have doctors they can go to, as well as replacing doctors when they retire from time to time. And I hope that you would take it from there and fill council in on some of the doctors we've been speaking to for plans this year and next year, as well as the introduction that you have today.
Great, thanks, Scott. Jill, welcome. take your mute off and you're all set. There we go. You're all set, Jill. Good evening. Can you hear us? Yeah, we'll just take a quick break, council, just to get Jill online here. Just a second here. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We got the glitch fixed. Technology, what a great thing. So again, we have Jill Croteau, who helps us with our physician recruitment. Again, welcome, Jill, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, everyone, and good evening. And I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to report on the physician recruitment efforts for the city of Port Colborne. As a bit of an update to our last report, we've actually been working with 3 physicians over the past few months who've been interested in relocating to Port Colborne. One who will be starting next month and who has joined us this evening, Dr. Matthew Vandenberg, and 2 additional physicians who will be starting, looking to start early 2022 and the fall of 2022. I will report more details on that once they've actually signed off on the contract. But did want to note that earlier this year, we did receive notice from Dr. Alan Daniel that he would be retiring from his practice at Mapleview Medical effective July 1st. And he'd be moving to BC for family reasons. So although the community was sad to see him go, we wanted to wish him all the best in the new chapter of his life and thank him for his years of medical service in the city of Port Colborne. So during this transition, we were successful in securing a replacement for Dr. Daniel's practice, and thrilled to announce that Dr. Matthew Vandenberg will be joining the city of Port Colborne and their medical community starting the week of September the 7th. So Dr. Vandenberg will officially start seeing Dr. Daniel's patients alongside Dr. Kelly Miracle, Jason King, and Dr. Emily Wilson as members of the Lockview Family Health Organization. So at this point, I would like to pass things over to Dr. Vandenberg, and he can give an introduction and say a few words to council.
Welcome,
Can
Doctor.
everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. No technical difficulties. I like it. So as Jill just alluded to, my name is Matthew Vandenberg. I am currently a family physician out in Fredericton, New Brunswick. I'm from Ontario originally, from Aurelia. My wife, though, is from Port Colborne. And so we have decided, amidst the pandemic, the need to have family close by, and thought this was a good opportunity to move back to Ontario and close to some family. So we are delighted to be moving to Port Colborne and have an opportunity to start our new practice there, taking over for Dr. Daniels.
Great, Matthew, and we really appreciate you kind of coming home. I know you're from Aurelia, but your wife is here, so we really do appreciate you coming in and taking over Dr. Daniel's practice and working with our staff, but particularly Jill, with regards to this. So welcome.
Thank you.
Council, any questions? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Dr. Vandenberg. I'm delighted I'm one of Dr. Daniel's patients, so I look forward to seeing you after September 7th.
That's right.
Welcome to Port. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Danch.
Hey, Matt, how's things?
Oh, not bad. You?
Is the move going along here, or what's
The
happening?
wife did all the hard part. She's already back with the 2 kids and the dog, so she made the serious trek. I've got a little easier, just closing up shop here, and then I'll be back a couple weeks behind.
Glad to hear you coming back to Port Colborne. Hopefully I can see you on a couple Monday nights, okay?
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Seeing none. CIO Louis, anything to add, or?
I'll just sign off on, I'm saying hi to Matthew for the first time. I don't know if my hand comes up after a lot of emailing back and forth and signing contracts and so on. So it is a success story from the program that we have where we share the service with the region. I appreciate the council members who asked the question and wanted an update, and we'll keep working away at it, bring in more nice doctors like Matthew, Dr. Vandenberg, and take care of the residents of Port Colborne. So thank you to the council members.
Great. Thank you, Scott. And again, Doctor, thank you. And Jill, thank you for the great work. And let's continue to having these types of meetings where you're introducing a new doctor here in Port Colborne. That's great. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, move on to the mayor's report. Out of an abundance of caution, Ontario is pausing its exit from the roadmap to reopening. Ensuring you get vaccinated is more important than ever with the new Delta variant of COVID-19. We have 2 pop-up vaccination clinics happening in Port Colborne this week. This is a great opportunity for you to get your COVID vaccination without having to wait for an appointment. On Wednesday, August the 25th, from 1 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., Port Cares and Beaujeu Pharmacy are partnering in a pop-up vaccination clinic being held at the Reach Out Center on Nickel Street in the parking lot in front of the food bank. There will be a hot meal service and the food bank will also be open. And on Thursday, August the 26th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., another pop-up clinic will be held at the Port Colborne High School. Please watch our social media pages for complete updates as we receive them from the province. At this time, it will be still important for you to wear a mask and maintain social distancing. And remember, get that needle. Staff are continuing to offer customer service support for residents, business, and visitors by phone, email, website, and social media channels. If you have questions in regards to City Hall services or would like to report a concern, you can contact a customer service representative Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by calling 905-835-2900, or you can use email at customerservice@portcolburn.ca. Alternatively, you can visit our website, www.portcolburn.ca, and submit a service request or inquiry by clicking on the Request a Service tab located on the top right corner of our webpage. The City of Port Colborne is offering you a chance to win the ultimate Port Colborne Staycation prize package, including 2 cruiser bikes, $500 in gift cards, and other special prizes. We have received well over 200 entries with 1 week to go. Snap a photo of one of the photo frames around the city, post it either to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter using hashtag Port Colborne Staycation, and you're entered to win. If you discover multiple spots in Port Colborne, snap a photo and tag us to be entered more than once. Complete contest rules and how to enter can be found on our website. Interested in participating but don't use social media? No problem. Participants can submit their photos by emailing your entries to communicationsofficer@portcolburn.ca. Last week I went out to celebrate the grand opening of the Enviro Niagara Group store on Clally Street, specializing in smokers, pellet stoves, and all things barbecue. And they were giving out some great tasters that day. Lots of people showed up to look at the store. It has been open, but intermittently, obviously due to COVID, they were finally glad to have their official grand opening. I also visited Cafe Lua on Clarence Street, where owners Geisha and Eva challenge our waistlines with delicious cheesecakes, baked goods, milkshakes, lattes, and coffee. And again, yes, they are good. This week I'll be dropping by our new local Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory franchise, and that's also on Clarence Street. Congratulations to each of these businesses, and wish you much success in Port Colborne. And to everyone, please stay safe, and we thank you. Any questions with regards to the mayor's report? Seeing none. Councillor Butters is not with us this evening. Are there any questions regards to regional council business? Seeing none. Staff remarks. Staff, any reports to council? Madam Clerk.
Good evening. If you did not see it in the paper or get a notification, I just wanted to provide information that the region is hosting a virtual open house regarding the expansion of the Port Colborne quarries, or their application for expansion. This is Thursday, September 9th at 6 p.m. and it'll be located on Zoom. You can pre-register on the region's website. If you did get the notice, information on how to access that is on there. You can also Google and search through the region's website, but if you have any difficulty, please feel free to call the region or call City Hall and we can help you as well.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yep. CAO?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. 2 short items, I hope. I was away from the last council meeting on vacation. I appreciate council giving me the time off with family. I understand when I was not here, the road allowance study was raised as a question. I'm not sure. I think an answer wasn't provided. I have spoken to the consultant, John Hack from Sierra Planning. I think the last time, if my notes are right here, they were before council, the second meeting of April. We always viewed this project, and I think council is aware of this, as a marathon, not a sprint. This isn't the road allowances vis-a-vis COVID. This is the road allowances forever, into the future and beyond COVID. The consultant was of the opinion that they're taking the summer to sort of watch and observe and see what does happen this year, our second year of COVID, even though it's not COVID specific, but to see how some of the changes that staff put in place, whether they're temporary or permanent, have an impact on the use of the road allowances. Their plan is to do a little bit more consulting with the business community and the BIA, the downtown BIA at least, and maybe the Main Street BIA. They also want to have a PIC, a public information center, in September, and they envision bringing a report to council soon after that September public information open house, which will probably be done in a virtual format, a Zoom type format. So that's the update. I don't have a date on that council report, but it would turn around after the September open house. So that's the update on the road allowance study. Second thing, I'll take questions on both after, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. The second thing, COVID. I did not present a COVID report this month, as I usually do in the second meeting of each month. That's partly because of my vacation and partly because there hasn't really been any developments in the regulatory environment on the policy side of the pandemic response. And except I know it was asked about staff and opening city facilities. We were planning for a fall September opening of city facilities. And when I talk about opening, I want to talk about two separate things. One is, can the person from the public come in and pull the door and have it open and walk right in? Walk right into the library, walk right into the, to the fire hall to get a permit, walk right into City Hall to drop off a building permit and so on. And the second component is, our staff back in the workplace? And both of those, I want to clarify by saying we are offering all of our services. So there are, maybe some extreme examples. We're not out there doing the fire smoke detector inspection program in people's houses right now, but we would like to get back to it. But you can come in on an appointment basis and sit in front of the building permit and pour over the plans for your construction and meet face to face. That absolutely can happen. It's on an appointment basis. And you just can't come in and swing the door open. You have to be met by a greeter, and the greeter will make sure you're okay to come in and bring you to see the building official. So that is taking place, and our staff are back to work. We have them a little bit spread out for safety. We have, just a few days ago, I saw 3 folks working out of Roselawn in the president's room because Roselawn is closed to the public. We've got 3 people there to keep, 4 to keep distance. And that does include some people working from home. We do have some people set up with the technology to work from home, and they alternate between being in person in the office and being at home. And that's just to keep the physical distance. So now we're sitting here with increasing numbers, possible 4th wave and the Delta variant that's in the news. That planned September opening, we're looking at it long and hard. It could be delayed. I can't call a date today. I have been talking to my colleagues at other cities and towns. The whole control group for the city has been watching, the numbers. I have seen a model as recently as today that predicts that we could be back to 2,000 cases per day by September 2nd, if nothing changes. These are the very circumstances that caused us to close our office, City Hall specifically, and our other facilities. And I just don't think it's responsible to open under the same circumstances that closed us. We have a very good track record among our employees. We want to keep the community safe as they're coming to see us, and we want to keep our workers safe. The best thing that everyone can do is exactly what the mayor just said. Practice the precautions that public health officials have taught us: hand washing, physical distance, minimizing contact, and getting vaccinated. Many staff and council members and members of our community already are, but the more that we do, the closer we are to reopening. And I think I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor, and take any questions on either subject if there are any.
Thanks, Mr. Louie. Any questions to the CAO? Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Scott. Scott, we're hearing a lot in the news about various agencies and levels of government making decisions around forcing employees to be vaccinated or look at daily testing, that sort of thing. Are we even approaching that kind of thought, or where are we on that?
Scott?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Demery. That's a great question. We have had those discussions almost every week in the control group meetings that we're having at the Emergency Operations Center. And even our staff, even our leaders, our leadership team is divided on that. The latest and greatest, and I know you're hearing about Toronto, and I know you're hearing about Hamilton, and I know you're hearing about private companies like Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Blue Jays, and forcing staff and fans to be vaccinated. We're not there yet. We think that whether or not an individual is vaccinated is their personal medical information. I can't tap employee A on the shoulder and say, have you been vaccinated? And the second component of that is that there are alternatives. If your alternative to a Maple Leafs game is to not go, or to show up with a paper that says you can't have a vaccine because of a separate condition that you have that prevents you from getting it. The alternatives that would be available to our employees is to produce an antigen-based test that proves that they're COVID-free, and that's very expensive. It's not often talked about in the media. The cost of that is borne by either the employer who's requiring the testing, or the employee who's required to provide it as an alternate to vaccination. And I'm not sure if we're ready to go down that road yet of the cost of that testing. So our HR staff has some legal work to do. They've got some legal opinions they already have. They're in consultation with other cities and towns, and we hope to make a decision that's consistent across Niagara municipalities in advance of the city reopening the doors to City Hall and other buildings.
Councillor?
That's great. Thank you so much. And if that does become a decision that has to be made, will that decision be made through council, or will it be made through the control group?
So, yeah, that's another good question. Through your worship to Councillor Demery, we sit at the control group and we make these decisions for the workplace, and we run a slippery slope between, can we implement them ourselves or should we bring them to council? Sometimes it's time function. How fast do we need to act, and is there a council member in a council meeting in a reasonable amount of time? I think a decision that is that serious, I want to have the weight and effect of the corporate leaders, the council of the city involved in that decision. So we would likely bring a recommendation, a go, no go decision that staff recommends, and let you decide if you'd like to go along with staff's recommendation or direct us to go in the other direction. So the answer is yes, council.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I needed.
Thank you, Councillor. And Madam Clerk has something to add.
I was just going to, through the chair, I was just going to add to what Scott said. And let council know that we are, while we're deciding about a vaccine policy or what the vaccine policy will be, we are keeping staff safe by treating everyone as if they are unvaccinated. We are keeping our social distance and masking and keeping people working at home and virtual as much as possible. So just let everyone know that we are still being safe in the meantime.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other staff members with updates? Chief Lawson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all council, I just wanted to give a little update on our efforts to control parking on fire lanes that aren't owned by the city. If you remember, Chief Cartwright was part of this. Signs were ordered to post at the end of all those fire lanes for letting the public know that that's a fire route. So those signs are now in. It was a little bit of a wait, but they are in. Roads Department are working on getting utility locates in and start working on installing those signs within the next couple of weeks, up to 3. And at that point, with legal's blessing, we've been told that we'll be able to have the power to tag and tow those vehicles on the fire lanes.
Great. Thank you, Chief Lawson. Any questions? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the chief. Is that just going to be a single sign at the entrance to the fire lanes, or a number down the fire lanes?
Chief?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, that's a single sign. It's going to be in a large sign, council, but it's going to be at either end of the access into that fire lane.
Good. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Counselor. Any further questions? Great, thank you, Chief Lawson. Any other comments or reports from staff? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go to Counselor's items. I'm going to start off with Counselor Demaray.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one thing that just came up today, and it was as a result of a social media post regarding an accident, a golf cart accident that involved a young child within Shirkston Shores. This proceeded to initiate a number of phone calls with regards to a large volume of golf carts accessing the road end allowance, primarily at Pleasant Beach, with regards to the gate being left open and golf carts accessing back and forth between Shirkston Shores and Rudders. There were some concerns that were raised that this volume of traffic of golf carts is excessively high because the gate is being left open. So I'm, through you, Your Worship, maybe to Director Kalamoto, regarding the access gates, is there any way we can control those a little bit better until we have that road allowance study completed and a formal action taken on those?
Mr. Kalamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we do have a lock on that particular gate. Unfortunately, there is vandalism that occurs quite often by cutting said lock off the gate, something that we can report to Niagara Regional Police. The other thing is there are some residents that do have keys to some of those gates. And then they may also leave that open. We do not have staff there. It's not a manned gate 24 hours a day, unfortunately. So we do have spot checks. And if we do note the gate has been open, we will lock it. But unfortunately, there are a number of keys out there and some of the residents who may leave that open, unfortunately.
Counselor?
I also understand that these locks that are put on there are not security locks. These locks are, the keys for those locks can be made by any locksmith, and there's nothing that restricts the users of these keys from having them duplicated. So it's my understanding is it's sort of a free, wild game of if I've got a key, I'll make a copy for my whole family, and then my whole family can go through it, the gate. So if we do have a lock on that, or if there are problem areas such as the Pleasant Beach one, is it possible to acquire a security lock, one that has a restriction on the copying of the keys, and put into place a temporary process for the handout of those keys, so that we can restrict the access primarily right now either to the Wildwood and Pleasant Beach one, where there seems to be a lot of transition between the resort and the private road areas?
Mr. Kalamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we can put a lock where nobody can access. And if there is a call, however, then staff would have some time frame to go and unlock it at a reasonable for a reasonable request. However, as there still are the road end studies open and still being done, we have not formalized what would equate to a reasonable request for access and what would not. So we were hoping for the road end study to give us that direction as staff when council has approved that. So there is that option to lock it down completely. However, if there are any requests, they would probably be either denied or delayed because staff couldn't be attending it all the time. So that is an option if council would like.
Councillor Wells?
I believe maybe I'll clarify myself once more here on this. There are security locks that can be put in place that have limited ability to copy the keys. So what I'm asking is if we could put a lock of that nature, not to say that we're going to lock it off permanently from anybody having access, but if we use a security lock with a key code that prohibits copying of the keys, then have the keys issued out to those people that require it for access. And from that perspective, we would then get the number of keys that are out there in control and be able to control the number of keys for that access rather than to have everybody in the Pleasant Beach Road area from the owners of the property right down to the renters of the property having these keys, which allows them free and open access. And some of those keys have been copied and are owned. The copies have been given to residents of Shirks and Shores so that they can access it from the opposite way around. So basically, we either are going to have to leave that gate wide open, take the lock off and forget about having locks on those keys, or put a lock on it that serves the purpose of that access gate. And that access gate, to my understanding, is for emergency access, which I'm not sure whether the fire departments and the police departments and the ambulance emergency measures offices have a key for that gate or not. If they do, that's great. But if they don't, then maybe they should be given a key that they know that that's going to work on that lock because that lock has not been vandalized or changed. And then on top of that, the number of keys that would go out would be then restricted to those people that applied for it or needed it as required by us. So again, either take the locks right off or put a lock on that serves the purpose.
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we can add a lock that would restrict the access. However, staff don't have a defined issue of what need is and what would necessitate key access. We were hoping to get that direction from council through the road end study. So if we would leave it up to staff, then we could definitely take a look at that. However, there is a gray area of what necessity is.
Councillor?
The necessity is that nobody gets injured by a golf cart that's exceeding the speed limit through that area, that's going through that area that causes adverse conditions, high volumes of traffic, that drivers that are underage. Again, the necessity is for health and safety and protection of the people that are on city property that the city could be held liable for. So I think something has to be done on this rather than to push it off to a study that seems to be in the wind somewhere. And I just think we need to look at this and get those access to those beachfronts under control. Thank you.
Councillor, may I suggest you put a motion on the floor to direct staff to do that then? It's the only way it's going to get done. If you want direction from council, that's what we need.
I will do that.
Okay, can you read a motion out then? Can you put a motion on the floor then?
Yes. I would like to move on a motion to have to direct staff to obtain a security lock with numbered keys that have limited copying only by authorization from the city, and to install those locks on the access gates that are problematic, starting with a priority at Pleasant Beach.
May I suggest you use all gates to be fair to all road ends? May I ask you to put that in as a friendly amendment, Councillor?
I would do that. The priority would be to start at one gate and work the way down, such that all gates would have the same type of lock and control system.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I get a seconder to that, please? Councillor Desmarais will second that. Questions to the motion? Councillor Bruno, then Councillor Danch, then Councillor Bodnar.
I think Councillor Danch had his hand up first. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, Councillor Danch.
Evening, folks. It's my second day at the hardware store. You want to know about keys? I got a little bit of training there. You could simplify things by maybe, if you showed me the key blank, I could tell you what's going on. I mean, the first thing you could probably do is just rekey the locks. That would get rid of the 20 years of the people that have keys. Before you guys go and do a study on a padlock. Secondly, if you get security keys, which I use myself, they can't be duplicated at the hardware store. You have to go to the locksmith. And I think we need to look at the type of lock that we're using before we need to. And I say, if these keys have been out there for years and years, guess what? It's time for an update. And the Johnson family that no longer lives at the end of that road, and the Miles family that moved in, they don't have a key yet. It's time to make some small changes before we make a big hurdle here. And I think, and don't quote me because I know we're on the local TV channel, I've spent upwards of $80 to $90 on a padlock due to the keyway that's used. So I think maybe me and Chris should have a little talk, because I got that like little hardware store training there. And you know what? I have lock picking tools. No problem, Harry. I went to a course. I learned how to do that kind of stuff. So just let's maybe move slowly on this one. That's just an opinion, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bruno, then Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you. I understand that what I'm hearing is that Councillor Wells would like to reduce the number and volume of people that have these keys out there. I don't think we answered the director's question as to who is going to get the key. So from that perspective, I don't know what this lock was going to be. Are these $20 keys because they're special? Are we still, is it to just reduce the frequency? I mean, people can leave gates open. I can hand somebody the key. Nobody knows who left it open. Nobody knows who did open it outside of a camera or a witness. I guess before spending the money, I just like a little more rounding as to costs and who's going to get a key. Is there any issue if the key is violated? Is there somebody going to who gets one printed? Like, I just don't understand the whole A through Z protocol with who's going to get the key. I'm not opposed to doing it if it reduces and limits. I just don't know the scope of that work, the scope of the cost, or who gets them. So I wouldn't mind those who, what, when, where, and how answered first. I don't know, Chris, if you could comment on that.
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the keys are approximately $30 each. And as Councillor Danch noted, to do the locks, approximately $100 plus the time for the staff to do. Again, it's not a matter of, with respect to the locks, we can put in a permanent lock, which nobody has access to, or has to come to the city to get access or to get a key. Again, as Councillor Bruno pointed out, is the criteria for the restriction or the access. There might be and that's why we were waiting for the road end study. There could be an option, as an example, that if there is only the 66-foot right-of-way with no other public beaches on either side, that there is no access granted unless they come in for municipal consent to do work, as an example. But then there is the other option, the other question as what happens to those road end access points where there are public beaches after the 66-foot road allowance, and are there different rules for those? So those are the kind of questions that have not been answered, or the direction has not been presented to staff, and that's where we are kind of in a little bit of a gray zone with respect to those keys, because there are people who just want to take a walker or a cart and get through to the beach because they have a hard time walking. But then there are others that are doing it for frivolous means and again are not responsible enough to close the gate behind them. And therefore there are those issues where all access is granted, and that is not the way we want to go either. Unfortunately, as the councillor pointed out, we do not have the manpower or the technology at this time, or the costing to police those gates 24 hours.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Harry's doing the right thing, trying to come up with a solution here. But when I hear Mr. Kawamoto saying that the locks are often cut off, that no matter what we put on there, someone's probably just going to keep cutting them off. And I think Councillor Danch and Councillor Bruno had some good points on what's the protocol going forward and who's going to make these decisions. So I'd be willing to certainly look at this and look for a solution. But I don't know, just putting a lock on it seems like it may not be the perfect solution to start with. So I'll wait to hear some other councillors speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Danch. Frank, these locks are your standard $10 Mastercraft or Master Lock that you buy off the shelf. A key is $3 to make. These are not, the locks that are on these gates are not high-end security locks like kryptonite locks, locks that cannot be opened unless they're opened with a torch or some plasma cutting device. So right now the gates have your normal home hardware lock that you get right off your old shelf, Frank. So that's one thing. With regards to the limiting or the policies that are in place to do this, we have our own facilities, our own lockups that we do in our own at our own city yards and things like that. We have an understanding, or staff have an understanding of what security is required. I know for a fact, because of my experience with various different security areas, that the locks that are there, if they can be cut off by somebody with a bolt cutter, then yeah, there is no security. For locks that are high in price and keys that have a high price tag to them, if they're reassigned out and they're lost, or somebody tries to duplicate them, then you get a report back, then you can extract that back. I appreciate that there's a bit more of a concern, of an ability or a requirement to manage this, but if we have someone get injured because of golf carts on our property, I don't know what repercussions we'll have on that regard. So my main thrust is that there's an increase in traffic, primarily at the Wildwood and the Pleasant Beach access points, that those are critical areas. Primarily the Pleasant Beach one because of the access between the resort and amenities outside of the resort. I don't think it's going to be that high a cost, and I don't think it's something our staff doesn't have the ability to put in place temporarily until the road allowance study is complete. So I'm just going to rest it with that and leave it up to the rest of council and staff to argue it out amongst themselves. But in my mind, I'll give you $100 for the first lock.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Without a doubt, this is a complex issue. There's no question to that. And I do remember several years back talking to a couple of counselors and some city staff about all the problems they had with items going missing as a result of so many keys to so many city lockers and parks that were all over the place. Carpenter's Hall in particular, I remember seeing a lot of theft going out of that place. So there were a lot of issues in the past. So this is not new, but considering that now we've had a situation where someone has actually been physically hurt, and there's lots of options for that to opportunities for that to continue happening, and considering people are just this is far more disrespectful now, I would think a starting point of replacing the locks with the cheap ones, rekeying the existing or replacing them, is a good starting point. People will surface that need the locks. You'll find out who they are and why they think they need it. In the meantime, it's giving staff an opportunity to start reviewing the situation, seeing who should have the locks, or should have the keys rather, and who shouldn't have the keys, and start making those kind of decisions or bringing it in front of council to make. But we need a starting point. It is a very inexpensive starting point. It's just to rekey or replace these very inexpensive locks, and then, you know, take Frank's expertise, consider that, consider what you know about the people who are using it and why they may need to use it, and come up with a better plan. But we do need a starting point, and that seems to me to be a very logical and inexpensive starting point. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm about to put my 2 cents in. Having worked in my employment, precious metal refinery, there are locks that are very, very strong and cannot be copied. The keys and the locks cannot be cut off with anything portable, or even unless a plasma cutter. We've had Brinks trucks that had to go back to Toronto to get a key because nobody in the whole refinery could break the lock open unless you cut a hole in the side of the truck, Brinks truck, which you don't want to do. Anyways, my other thought was the whole thing with the keys. I was under the impression it's for emergency vehicles and for residents who live along the lake that want to do work on their property. Like, nobody else is supposed to have a key. I've seen people haul beer and everything else, and I've seen people go through Wildwood Beach, right out to Shirks and Shores. Like, basically, I was also under the impression that at Shirks and Shores, for area residents to access that place, you're supposed to go through the main gate. That's your permit. That was my impression, not through going through the Pleasant Beach Road and Wildwood. And I think that's part of Shirks and Shores' fault. Like, maybe we should ask Shirks and Shores to stop the carts from entering their property from city property. Like, it's all going to their place. They're making tons of money there for rental of cottages or trailers. I'm sure we asked them to help us out a bit. But they're the ones causing the problems, Mr. Mayor. And so that's all I got to say about that right now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demery, is your hand still up, or are you done?
No, I'm done, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno?
I guess what I'm concerned of, if we start back with an inexpensive lock, I think to Harry's point, we start with the premise that somebody can just take bolt cutters and cut it. So I think if we're going to do anything with a lock, the one thing we should learn is that a cheap lock doesn't work. So to me, that's sort of ground zero. Secondly, I'm not so sure when this change wants to occur, but I go back to the protocol. If there's a bunch of people that legitimately should have keys and a bunch of people that illegitimately have keys, so you change it to a good lock Wednesday morning, nobody's aware of it. The people who want legitimate access, what do? Do they call City Hall, customer service? Do they ask to speak to Chris? Who's the issuer of the key? What key? Is there a deposit? And again, if 30 people have the right to do that, morning one, 29 people can no longer get in. So what do? Like, it just seems to me that this just needs a little bit more filling out as to how a legitimate person who's had a legitimate key now gets a new key. And who is it at Public Works or the City Hall that's going to give them a key? Like, what story do they need to tell? What proof do they need to show? Like, I think we're just leaving staff with this, with no rules. And, you know, is it the right decision? Is it the wrong decision? Should I at least pay $30 for the key, right? So so we're not actually out the money for the key. Like, I just think there's a lot of unanswered questions here that I have before, 20 people start calling Chris or City Hall. Again, happy to do a quality lock, happy to do a quality key if it's going to make sense, but I don't think you can just leave staff out to dry on this one without other direction. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the council would like, we can separate this particular issue of access to road ends away from the road end study, and staff could come back with a report and a recommendation that council could look at.
Okay, Councillor Wells?
That'd be fine with me. Again, I think we leave staff with a lot of authority in a lot of areas. We can leave staff with the authority to make deals up to $1.8 million, but for a simple lock system process, not leaving that up to staff to allow them to do that, I think that's, I don't think that's overburdening them. But if we want to delay this longer and longer and put it into the same sort of cycle as the road end allowances, let's put it off to another time and allow it to fester some more.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch? Mute, Councillor Danch.
Sorry about that. Through you, I don't think we need to spend a lot more time on this. Maybe Chris and I, we could have a little conversation and, like have a little lock talk. Never mind the bolt cutters that I sell and the M1 blanks that we cut for keys all over the place and that kind of stuff. And I'm sure we can satisfy Harry and his needs out there. I mean, golf carts are silent. They come up from behind you. They're like a bicycle. You don't hear them coming, man. And if somebody gets tagged, it's going to hurt a lot. So I think maybe Chris and I should have a short talk and give Harry back a little bit of info and keep the people out there safe. That's what it's all about, right?
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
I was just going to say, I think to Councillor Wells' point, and I understand the frustration and why we can't just do something, but I think actually Director Kawamoto's answer was to just do that, was to separate it from the road end study and just focus on this key issue. I think Councillor Danch's a good point. People behind the scenes get together, come up with some kind of rational thing, run it by the Ward 4 councillors, and there's no reason I think we couldn't get something started, but I just like to see that happen first. I just don't like to see it sprung on staff with no direction. And I'm sure that it's easy to say that, well, they'll come up with something, and then when we don't like it, we'll be saying, why'd you come up with that? I'd rather have the pre-discussion and get something rolling. That would be my suggestion. So that's what I would move we do, and I'm sure that can happen in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Clayliff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could I make a motion that we have Mr.
There's a motion on the floor, Councillor.
Separate?
There's a motion on the floor. You can make an amendment to the motion.
Make an amendment so that we have Mr. Kawamoto separate out the lock issue and address it as he sees it needs to be addressed to bring back to us for resolution.
Just a second, Councillor. So, Councillor Clayliff, the clerk is stating that that's not an amendment, that's actually a whole different motion. So the only way to get that on the floor would be to either defeat Councillor Wells' motion or Councillor Wells withdraws his motion. So you may want to wait till the vote comes up to see where we are. Okay?
That's fine. If Councillor Wells wants to leave it, then I'll wait till the vote goes up.
Great, thank you. Just a couple questions through myself, I guess, to Mr. Lawson. Chief, with regards to emergency vehicles, regardless whether there's gates or not, emergency vehicles are never going to be driving on the beach, correct? Because of chances of them getting stuck?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, the only time that we would drive on the beach is with our 4x4 pickup trucks. We will haul equipment in and back and forth with that. But it's very seldom that we'll put a truck down there.
So what I'm primarily talking about is police and ambulance wouldn't be going on our road ends. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you would have keys, obviously, to the road ends? Your department?
Yes, we do.
Great, thank you. I think that answers Councillor Bagui's comments. I'm not sure which staff member can answer this because this is going on for so long. Most of those people are retired. My recollection on this is the keys were originally handed out for those that needed to do work on their walls or their properties where they didn't have access next to their properties. We've seen that happen this year. But over the years, as has been said many times here, keys are made, locks are broken, locks are changed, more keys are given out. We shouldn't be giving out keys for people to drive their golf carts, and quite frankly, the golf carts aren't just from Shirks and Shores. They're actually cottage owners and homeowners that live in those areas. I get complaints in my office both sides, whether it's somebody from Shirks and Shores or it's a cottage owner or a homeowner that lives along the lakeshore that are zipping up and down roads in their golf carts. But for us to sit here and say, let's give keys out and worry about those that have golf carts to get on and off the beach, we shouldn't be allowing golf carts on our road ends anyways, quite frankly. As far as the liability issue goes, I mean, that's why those gates are there. My understanding they're always there for, quite frankly, is the work to be done on people's seawalls and access by our staff to get down there for different infrastructure that we may have. So other than that, I don't know why all these people have keys. I really don't. If it's to launch boats or to use their golf carts, that's why we have a boat launch at Cedar Bay and we have our boat launch at our marina. That's what should be used. If we're having people use these road ends and somebody decides to take their 4x4 or tractor or whatever it is to launch their boat, I mean, that's just as bad as a golf cart. So, I mean, I know we have our winter time when we have the snowmobilers go out on the ice to ice fish, but I think that's a whole different story than the summertime when our road ends are, no matter which road end it is, locals and those from out of town may use. So Councillor Wells has hit it on the head, and Councillor Danch with regards to safety. So giving this to staff and have staff go back with Councillor Wells and Councillor Danch to talk about it and get this thing rolling is what I'd like to see. So, but I'll leave it up to you guys. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Or Mr. Kalamoto, you have your hand up still, or is that up from before?
To you, Mr. Mayor, and to the rest of council, again, I'd like to repeat, it's not a matter of us changing the locks. Those are things that we can do. It is more, as Councillor Bruno pointed out, a matter of protocol and who we do give those keys out to after those locks are changed. Obviously, as there are more criminal acts of cutting those locks, we will change those locks to something that are more substantial, and that would be harder to break. There's a box around some of those locks that make it very difficult to access a cutter to cut some of those locks. So those are some things that we currently already have in place. However, with the recent crime spree, it seems that we should be upping our game as staff to put in something a little more substantial. You did mention some of the history. Unfortunately, I'm not completely aware of that. I have heard rumblings from staff about the history of how the keys have been handed out. I have recently got calls about people that have had accessibility issues and wanted to drive their carts onto the beach because they had hard issues walking. I have had recent requests for boat launches, and obviously we have had professional requests for construction of walls, and those are taken care of through municipal consents. So there are ways around those, but we will definitely beef up the locks themselves, and I will be speaking with Councillor Danch to get his expertise on which ones that staff should be implementing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. Anything further, Councillor Wells, before I go to the vote?
No, nothing further from me, Your Worship. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions. Oh, Councillor Bodnar?
Can you just clarify what the motion is now at this time?
Madam Clerk?
The motion is to direct staff to obtain security locks with numbered keys and limited duplication and install that at all road end gates.
Councillor Bodnar?
Okay.
All right. Seeing no further questions. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? The motion is defeated. Councillor Clayloff.
So I would like to make a motion that we look to basically what Mr. Kalamudu was saying, that we move forward and we get strengthened security at the gates. We move forward and look at ways to do this, but we do it immediately. So I'm saying what you were saying, Mr. Kalamudu, if we put these new locks on, right away we'll have access to who's got them at this point, because we will have to hand out new keys for these secure locks, right? So we would know then who is given those locks. They would be numbered. We'd know how many were out there.
Before we move on to Mr. Kalamoto, Councillor Clayloff, I'm going to have Madam Clerk help you with this motion. Madam
Okay.
Through the chair, so let me know if this is what you're looking for. To direct staff to investigate ways to secure the road ends and bring a report back to council with recommendations.
Councillor?
Basically, yes, that's what I'm looking for, but I guess I'm just looking a little bit more for what Mr. Kalamudu had said as far as going with the better lock, but at the same time determining if we need more.
Yeah,
right?
That's what this will include.
To go forward to what Councillor Wells, if we need to go to that point, we go to that point.
That's what your motion will do, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Can I get a seconder to that? Councillor Bruno. And Council, can I ask you to start using raise your hand? It's tough for me to see some of your hands, so use raise your hand, or I probably won't go to you. I've got Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I don't know if Councillor Clayloff would. My concern was that the clerk read back a motion that talked about all road ends. And I'm just wondering if there's an appetite around the table to do Pleasant Beach and Wildwood and see how that works. Because I don't know how many road ends there are, but I'd hate to come up with a solution that did work and implement it 20 times and then find out we should have used a different lock. So I don't want to belabor it, but I think if we find the right solution, we'll know in 2 or 3 weeks, and if it works, let's do them all up. But I'd like to make a friendly amendment, unless Councillor Clayloff wants to do that, that we start out with those 2 road allowances, Wildwood and Pleasant Beach.
I have no issue with that, but I think that's where the report will come in, Councillor. I think we let staff look at that, because some of the road ends don't have gates, so it's irrelevant for those. So they can come back to us and look at which ones do, which ones don't, which ones we should. All I'm saying is if you're going to be consistent across the board. Because you know what will happen? Those road allowances that we don't touch that have keys will have more keys, and more people will be using those. So I think it's best to be consistent across the board. So let the report speak for itself. Mr. Kalamoto, do you have anything to say on that?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's good. We will come back. Does council have any direction with regard to the protocol and allowing, or whom to allow onto after we change those locks? Because if we do change them, then there would be no access granted to anybody unless they come to the city and request those keys. So all the former keys would be invalidated.
Council, any direction for the report? Councillor Danch?
Through you, of course, Chris, I think that's a great idea. I mean, every once in a while, you just got to make a change. You're saying that's a $30 key. If those people on those road allowances want access, it's $30 for the key. You're not going to be able to copy them because that's the way it is. And I don't think the cost should be burdened to the community on keys that get lost, whatever. So I think you're going in the right direction, but those people that want to be a key holder should have to open their wallet and pay the price, because then there would be some accountability for what's going on at the road ends. I'm not down at that end of town. I know Ron and Harry are. Hey, I'm in Ward 3. I mean, I got my issues here, but no, I think it's a good start, and that's the way we should go.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar, then Councillor Wells. Councillor Bodnar.
Yes, just through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris. Chris, some people may have beach wells, and they may occasionally need access to those for, either a plumber or to do some work on their own. So that might just be something you should put in your report also, how that will it be arrangements with city staff to open and close that to allow them to come, because they may not need that key daily. It may be once a year or something like that. So just another thought to put in your report. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Worship. We are concerned about people not knowing about this happening. So maybe also we should look at how we could utilize our website, our social media, to make people aware of it before we actually change the locks. And that way it'll follow the same process of all of our public announcements, all of our public sharing of things that we're doing, so that it is well known that tomorrow we're going to change the locks. So if you need a key, let us know ahead of time.
Mr. Kawamoto, you can do that as part of this and work with our communications department, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. Again, just trying to understand what the protocol would be for the criteria of allowing access or restricting access. With regard to Councillor Bodnar, thank you very much for that information. I was unaware of it, so that will definitely be a part of the report.
Okay, great, thank you. Councillor Bodnar, is your hand up again, or is that just up from when it was up? Thanks. Councillor Kleoff.
Through you to Mr. Kalamutu, you're asking for the process. Would it not be exactly what it's basically been for seawall repairs, for emergency vehicles, the things that it was really meant to be to begin with? And those are the things that would be approved to give these keys out. Am I wrong in saying that? There's no other reason particularly that anyone should have a key, even as far as access. You look at limited ability to get in there. Perhaps they could be directed to enter Sherkston through the main entrance versus going in that way.
Mr. Kawamoto?
Just a thought. I don't know how everyone feels, but I just think that if we just go back to what it was actually meant to be for and stick with that and go from there.
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we will put those recommendations in the report. My apologies for clarification. It was the seeking direction before the report or any of the additional recommendations are approved by council after the report. I was looking for interim direction with regard to allowing those access to the beach. However, from what I'm hearing from the councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor, that if it is just the restriction for wells or for construction, then I can definitely run with that direction.
Great, thanks, Mr. Kawamoto. I think council, between now and the report coming here, can certainly contact you with their thoughts on those types of issues. So I think everyday use for somebody to run up and down with their golf cart isn't one of those, but everything else you've talked about it certainly is. But if council wants to do that, I know Councillor Bodner has been involved in that for a long time, and Councillor Wells for the time he's been here. So if council could let Mr. Kawamoto know, then he could certainly keep those in or put those in the report as it comes back. Any further question, councillors? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Now that everybody's moved around, I started with Councillor Desmarais, then I went to Councillor Wells. I'll go to Councillor Baggy.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. I sent mine in early and they all got answered. Thank you very much, staff.
Thank you. Councillor Clayliff.
That's the same for me, Mr. Mayor. I sent all my things in early. And thank you, a special thank you to Charlotte for getting me the answers I needed.
Perfect, thanks. Councillor Bodner?
Nothing here, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Danch?
Well, you got me on a bad night tonight. So I had sent a note to bylaw. Do we have a bylaw representative? Are we going to pick on Scott there with that one?
No, Scott's the leader of the bylaws. You go through Scott, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Scott, I sent a couple things to the bylaw and I never received anything back. I have a Hillcrest resident that's got a parking ticket for parking in front of their house at 11 Hillcrest. Apparently they were 1.3 meters away from the driveway. And they got a $25 ticket and they're kind of wondering why. And I says, well, you know, it's your house, it's your driveway. And you see parents parking their vehicles in front of their driveway so the kids don't run their bicycles out and stuff like that. It's a single car driveway. And I don't know if bylaws gone over and above their duties, but I just find that this is maybe something that we should be looking at in a bylaw situation. Parking in front of your own home, being close to your driveway. I don't see the need for the charge there, but if you could give me a little feedback on that, I'd appreciate it.
Chief Lawson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Councillor, if you could just forward me that email, I could get you an answer probably someday or midday tomorrow, if that works for you.
Councillor?
Yeah, and certainly. Thank you so much for that. So I've got two more. I hate to drag this on. Hey, Mr. Mayor, our favorite watering hole on Main Street that some of us have used in the past has really gone downhill. And again, I sent this to bylaw and I had no reply, but the weeds are far beyond what is allowed. And it's going on the vacant lot as well on Erie Street. And it's simply a matter of no maintenance and nobody else can do it. So if you could put a request into the property owners of that, it would be appreciated.
Chief Lawson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor, that property was actually identified about a week and a half ago. So we're in the process of giving them their time to deal with it before we do.
Councillor?
Thanks so much, Scott, because I mean, it is the main drag in town and you know, it has been a favorite place for a lot of people over the years, and unfortunately it hasn't gone through. My last problem is on Erie Street in Kalali. Property owner there has a driveway on Erie Street, constantly being blocked by whoever, the residents across the street, somebody visiting. He had sent me some pictures. Unfortunately, it was too large for me to forward, and my computer knowledge didn't allow me to make it smaller so I could send it to you. I've got several pictures. I say I can't. I don't know what to forward to them. Maybe I can get the hold of IT. But you know, it's an ongoing thing. There's a bell box there, and I don't know. Maybe we could just put a no parking between signs type of thing there to let the guy get out of his driveway when the heck he wants to get out of his driveway. But those are my three concerns for this week. Sorry I didn't feed you some of the information earlier on. Some of it just came to me recently, but if you could look into that, I would appreciate it.
Mr. Lawson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we can look into that. If you could give me a little bit more detail on the Erie and Kalele issue, I would appreciate it. We can look into that. Going forward, if you could, to all of council, just CC me on your emails, and that kind of gives me a heads up of what's coming.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I think Councillor Bruno's the last councillor.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of thank yous tonight and one issue. I'd like to thank Steve, Chris, Scott. I know Steve worked on this earlier. I know there were, this was on the Barrack Road issue with trucks. And I know Councillor Danch has been involved in this and heard from one particular neighbor on it. So thank you for getting the signs up through the MTO on at the entrance to the Loyalist to be able to go through there, and on Barrack Road. Chris, I did receive your email today. Thank you for, I'm wondering if you could explain to the public here now what you plan on doing as far as the, actually you can, instead of no truck, this is the truck route sign. And I think you referenced these are colored signs and what your plans are. So just for the benefit of people on Barrack Road, that it's being used as a cut across the city. Secondly, and I don't know if this is for you, Chris, or if it's an IT issue, but one of the issues along the way have been truckers going through that way that are from, in most cases, out of province, certainly out of Niagara. And when they do their route check, whether it's Google MapQuest or their GPS, it is not identifying Barrack as a no truck route and not showing Loyalist as a truck route, as a preferred route. And so I don't know if there's anything that you've ever been involved with or who one can talk to, so that actually the truckers that are coming in are currently being directed to use Barrack Road. Again, I'm not talking about local trucks, and frequent flyers through there, but out of province and out of region trucks. So I don't know if you can address that second issue as well.
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor and to the public on Barrack Road. What staff are looking into are to putting signs up about actually where the truck should be going, the actual truck routes, to put in the physical signs. Basically, it's a green circle with a truck, and it has an arrow directing the truckers where the actual truck route is. That's above and beyond the red circle with the slash on it with the truck, which is where they should not be going. In addition to that, staff are going to be creating a map that will be available on our website as to direct those looking for it where the truck routes actually are within the city and the roads that they should be taking. When that does happen and is created and put up on the city website, we will be reaching out to the businesses that have the majority of the trucking coming in that operate within the city, and just give them an update of that map and where to find it, maybe even a copy of that, just so that they are aware of the routes that their employees should be taking when trucks come in and out of the city. Along with that, we are trying to contact Google with regard to restricting trucks so that they may hopefully put it on their website. Again, with a huge conglomerate, one can only ask. The other thing that I would like to mention, since the councillor gave me the opportunity, is to note that a lot of these apps and these websites depend on the software, and the software takes algorithms into consideration. So as people, whether it be truckers or personal vehicles, use certain routes, the algorithm predicts, if they have their phone on, the algorithm predicts what is the shortest route with respect to time and to distance. And as more and more people use certain routes that are quicker with respect to time, that is then used through the algorithm to give other people that direction, whether they be coming from out of province or whether they be local, to use those particular roads because they are the fastest at that time. As that person drives through there with their phone, that algorithm updates. So if it is a faster route, it is then told to others that it is a faster route, whether that be Google Maps, whether that be the Waze app or others. So I just wanted to point that out. It is a live and constantly updated software system through that software and the algorithms.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was most helpful and educational. I should note when you started talking about that, because this would have been before your time, it was brought up for what was the old Robin Hood mill, a series now. Again, that shows Omer Avenue as the route when their trucks are coming down Elm Street. And it doesn't even recognize, this was a number of months ago, or a year ago, I should say, does not recognize Sherwood Forest Lane, which was particularly built to take the trucks not through the residential portion on Omer, but a direct route right up to the road to Erie. So I don't know with your truck route signs, and while you're doing that with Google or MapQuest or anybody else, just a reminder if you could throw on Sherwood Forest Lane off of Elm Street. Thank you. The other one, Mr. Mayor, I have is just to thank Scott Lawson. Some great quick response on, and I know Frank was involved with pointing this out, on Kalali Street West and the issues there. Appreciate that very much. And finally, I had the opportunity to stop into Cruise Porters on its last day in Port Colborne on Saturday. They presented us as a city with a framed drawing of Gravelly Bay and the entrance to the Welland Canal. So I'll drop that off, Mr. Mayor, at City Hall. They plan on certainly coming back to the city as a second location. They're going to Crystal Beach for the time being, but this is on their radar to establish a second store here. So thank you for that opportunity, and I'd like to thank the tenants there, wish them well in their new location, and to hurry back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I do have one item for staff for Mr. Long. If Mr. Long could come on. Great, thank you. So, Mr. Long, there's been some misinformation out in the public with regards to the recent city's fortune to receive $750,000 through a granting program. Before I make any further comment, can you please describe how that process went?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. Yes, this is great news for our city. I'm pleased to provide some clarification. So, so by way of background, back in mid-June, the federal government announced the details of the Canada Community Revitalization Fund, and the deadline to submit an application was July 26th. Staff reviewed the program criteria, and we felt that there was a good match between the program criteria and the city's waterfront redevelopment strategy, particularly on the west side and the cruise ship initiative. Staff came to council on July 12th, seeking direction and support to file an application to that program. We received that support on July 12th. Staff continued to meet virtually and at City Hall to talk about the project and our application. We also worked with a landscape architect to finalize some concept plans, and staff prepared and finalized and submitted an application to the Canada Community Revitalization Fund. It was submitted on July 24th, 2 days before the deadline. And we received notification, I think, less than 2 weeks afterwards that we were successful. So I hope that helps, Mayor Steele.
Thank you, and I think that hopefully to the councillor who claims that this may have been a backdoor or some type of conspiracy theory, how we received our $750,000, I don't think the federal government just goes and speaks to somebody in the back door to give some community money. Our staff worked very hard with this. Our council discussed this at great lengths that evening, and it was passed by council, so it's supported by council. So it is quite upsetting to myself and quite frankly some other councillors that have heard this and the misinformation being spread by a councillor in this community. So I'm disgusted in it. You know, councillor, you're voted here to lead a city. So start leading. Quit being negative. Quit being backdooring what we're trying to do here. If you don't like something, then you sit at a council meeting and you make your thoughts known, and whether you vote for something or you vote against it. It's not to run out in the community and spread misinformation. So I'm not gonna ask you. I'm gonna tell you, please stop it, because it's not how councils work. This council's been working very hard for the betterment of the community, and to have something come back to my office and other councillors is not the way this council has ever done business. So I'm going to put that out there, and I thank Mr. Long and his staff, and I thank those councillors that are moving this community forward with regards to the projects that we're doing. You know, you may not agree with everything all the time, but once it's passed at this council, you've got to sit and work with it. So that's all I'm going to leave it at. So thank you. I'm moving on to items for consideration. Item 7.1, the Public Works Department Report 2021-205 be received. The council approved funding for the construction of water main on Erie Street in the amount of $1.88 million, and the council delegate the authority to the Director of Public Works to award the construction contract to the lowest bid proposal through the city's tender process. I have Councillor Bruno and Councillor Wells moving that. I'm going to go to Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. First off, there's lots of thank yous to go around. Chris, I know we pushed hard. Steve, I know, was burning the midnight oil, getting drawings done. It's really a team effort to try and get this in this fall. I know the residents, the 54 residents on Erie Street really appreciate that. I think it will, I'm glad we followed the policy of worst first, as opposed to in many years past, sort of trying to divvy it around the ward system or other ways of pushing forward a report. Chris, I want to ask you a poignant question, because you were it was very enlightening that I believe it was you or your staff had brought in at a time a consultant who spoke to us about the water leaks on the private side of the curb stop. And I found it very interesting, the kind of numbers that she came up with that might be leaking there on the private side. What I want to say has been discussed before at previous times over the years through council. I don't know if it could be a pilot project. I don't know if you could come back with your thoughts on it. But in your report, you know, that water line was built in the 40s. And my concern is, so might be some of the private laterals. And so to that end, I'm wondering if we should look at something when we're doing a street whereby we do something to encourage private homeowners to look at their lateral, whether that can be a fixed grant if they do it within a certain period of time, whether we should be talking to people about, if you're going to replace your lateral, let's do it maybe at a time when the city contractor is coming in with the lateral to the curb stop, and then their trench is open and they're putting theirs in. I would love to see there being an incentive program on this, because I think what we'll find is, and this is just a guess, but over the years, those 54 laterals, a bunch of people have changed them out. So I don't know that the number will be 54, but, even at a couple $1,000s each, it's significant. It would be $100,000. At the end of the day, it always seems kind of futile that you fix the main, you fix the lateral, but we don't fix the rest. And I know I know the gas company does that, and everybody else, they take it to the house. And I'm cognizant of the fact that, if you gave the people there $2,000 who put in a lateral at that time, match it with their two, and it gets done, if that was 40 people, that's $80,000 that doesn't go to the next water main project. So it's real money and it's a real cost, but I'm just wondering what your initial thoughts might be. And is it something that might be worth some thought before we get into the project?
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, a grant program is something that we are looking at. And you just foreshadowed maybe the 2022 budget requests that we'll be working with Director Bowles on with regard to helping those who would like to change out some of their piping from the public and private border to their side. Just for some clarity, it's not often the private water line that has a lot of leaks. There are some, obviously, but there are often the sanitary laterals that have some disconnection. So
Okay.
It is actually the sanitary section, the sanitary part of the system that do often have those misalignments just because of the settling as to when those pipes go in. I would, however, like to point out that there are some new legislations coming down the line and some cooperative works throughout the region and the province, both on the private and the public side, that are going to actually examine how we build the sanitary laterals and the sanitary piping and try to minimize the I&I from the sanitary side. So those are some of the things that we are going to be looking at. So both on the water side, maybe helping residents out who do want to change some of their piping, and on the sanitary side with regard to some of the legislation and implementation of that with regard to new laterals coming down the line.
Thank you,
Great,
Mr.
thank you, Chris.
Kawamoto.
Thanks for all the great work in getting this done as soon as possible. Hopefully we can get started in the fall, but I know there's issues beyond your control on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Kawamoto. I have two questions. The first question's related to option C. Option C is coming straight down the middle of Erie Road as compared to the other two options. Does that present more obstruction for the residents in that area? And is there going to have to be more consideration given to sectioning off the progress of that, the revamping of the water main?
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we have taken a look at the disruption to the public when we are taking a look at the options. On the meeting right now is Supervisor Salas, who may be able to illustrate that maybe a little bit more appropriately than I can.
Mr. Salas?
Through the mayor, to the councillors, question. Yes, we did look at the three different options. The option one, which is installing the water main in the same trench, poses a lot of restrictions for us, especially for existing trees that we don't want to be able to remove or cut down. One of the things that we are avoiding with the option A is putting in temporary water connection. This could pose a little bit more inconvenience to residents by doing it this way. By us choosing option C, it gives us a lot more flexibility in trying to avoid issues as relates to construction, any conflict with other infrastructure like the sewer laterals. But yeah, we chose option C just simply because we're trying to find the most convenient way of constructing the water main.
Counselor?
My concern was that going down the center of the road could block off the road entirely as compared to going down one of the sides of the road, which would leave at least half of the roadway open. So that my concern was for complete blockage of Erie Street to resident local traffic, rather than, and it was just a matter of being able to advise and control the traffic so the residents aren't inconvenient as much as something, anyway, something that was not foreseeable.
Mr. Salas?
Yes, through the mayor to the councilor, you are absolutely correct, Councilor Wells. At the time of writing of the report, it was identified that the water main will go at the center of the road. As of our meeting from last week, as part of our communication with the consultant, we did consider that. So therefore, the water main will go on the southbound lane, giving us access to through Erie while doing the construction.
Counselor?
Thank you. The one other question I had in regards to that it has already been answered. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For Councilor Bruno and for Director Kawamoto, I did bring to council a couple of years ago. It was $10,000 or $20,000 that got passed by council in the budget for changing lateral lines on residences. It got passed upon Peter Paget was pretty well in charge of it, but I think what the problem was, it wasn't really advertised, or people didn't know about it actually. That's about the part of the bottom line. We never picked it up on our media and our website at all. So it was still getting upgraded, I guess, our website. So I'm all for the incentive. It costs between $3,000 and $4,000 to change your lateral. I already looked into it for my house. So I fully support that, Mr. Mayor. And I do think operations and looking at saving the trees because of the destruction of digging around them. And because those trees are pretty big, there are probably a lot of sanitary sewer lines that are cracked that hopefully the residents are going to fix. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Counselor. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you. Item 7.2, that Public Works Department Report 2021-224 be received, that Council direct the Manager of Water and Wastewater to apply for Green Infrastructure Stream funding for water main replacement projects. I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu moving this. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Kawamoto, I believe. We just had a discussion in regards to Erie Street, and that may not start until the spring of 2022. This program for the grants, would Erie Street apply to that if we didn't start it until 2022?
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. I'm sorry, I don't know the specific dates off the top of my head. I do know that that maybe Manager Sutter may be able to illustrate some of those timings better than I can. But yes, there is that option to delay the Erie Street project. And I believe that Manager Sutter should be able to maybe tell council the options that are acceptable to for the funding.
Ms. Sutter?
What's eligible and what may not be eligible.
Okay, great. Ms. Sutter?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. The federal funding, the requirements for the funding is that the project cannot start before the funding's been awarded. So the construction itself, we could apply for funding, but it could not start until it's been approved, which would be late in 2022. So any eligible projects, they have to start once funding's been announced, and they have to be started by September the 30th of 2022 and completed by the end of October 2026. So this would push Erie Street back. The good thing about this funding program is it doesn't just cover construction. It has to have a construction element, but it also covers design. And because Erie has already been designed, those costs would be ineligible for the grant. It would just be the construction that would be eligible.
Councillor?
Thanks, Darlene. Again, I just was trying to see if we could get some more money thrown at this a different way, but that's great. Are these grants annual, or are they a one-time only for the 5-year period?
Ms. Sutter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is at this point a one-time grant, but the good thing about it is that we do have, it's again between 2022 and 2026. And according to the sessions that we attended, it can be more than one project in the municipality in our water system. And that's why we are intending, looking at the pricing, to basically get as many projects as we can. The maximum is $5 million. And the municipality would only have to pay 26.67% of that $5 million. So the ones that we've suggested in the report are the ones suggested by staff, and by looking at water main break information and water quality data. And we're looking at the pricing now to see what we can fit in there. You do have to have a contingency because it is happening over a 4-year period. So you have to consider that inflation and that costs may rise as well. So we are trying to get, we're hoping to apply for the maximum and get as much water main as we can and try and get that $5 million.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wells?
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Darlene, thank you very much for this report. It shows that the city is going very proactive, fixing our leaks, Davis Street, Hawthorne Heights, Homewood, Berkeley, West Street South. Shovels in the ground, that's what the taxpayer wants to see. I know a lot of our grants depend on shovel-ready projects also, along with a lot of other projects. I got provincial elections next year or something like that too, I think. So maybe more money kick around then too for grants. But I do want to thank you. And I was concerned at first where the study was completed in 2014, but you guys are going to update the whole report by the end of 2022, which I really appreciate. And I think the residents really appreciate that also, because it's showing that council is going forward. We got to fix these leaks. I don't like paying my water bill. I hate paying my wastewater bill, but I have to do it. And we're showing something for it now. So thank you very much, operations and Darlene.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Actually, Darlene answered it about getting the next project up and going to qualify. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a comment on what something that Councillor Wells talked about, whether this is an ongoing. In fact, last week when CAO Louis, Mr. Long, and myself met with different ministers, there was a number of ministers we talked to about that with regards to getting a national program like gas tax that comes in for water, sewer, and that it's a standard number each year, so that across Canada, water and sewer can be looked at, and we can actually apply for it every year as opposed to waiting for programs coming forward. So that is something that the provincial government is talking to the federal government about. We won't know until after September the 20th what happens, but those conversations are being had, so I'm sure we're not the only province. So I'm glad you brought that up, Councillor Wells. Okay, no further questions. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Well, that's carried. Item 7.3, the Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-206 be received for information. This has to do with Niagara Transit Governance Update. Councillor Bruno moves this. I'm going to ask Councillor Desmarais to second it. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I sent that question in early, and I was pleased with CAO Louis' response. The one part, though, I wanted to tie up in there, though, what I was referring to, though, was that council passed a dollar figure to go with on demand, and it was based on demand within an expanded schedule. When you read the region's report, I agree with the premise of standardizing hours. You don't want somebody from Port Colborne who works in Niagara Falls who at night can't get back or can only get back part way. And he's supposed to know that the Port Colborne end doesn't run as long as the rest of the route. So kudos to them for wanting to do some standardization. I guess when I see the 3,000 and some odd additional hours by the standardization, what I see is not 3,000 more hours of necessarily something per hour, but our premise wasn't based on those expanded hours. So while nobody might use those additional hours late in the evening or on Saturday and Sunday, our on-demand system wasn't costed on the basis that now someone has a window of opportunity in those new hours to call for the cab or the trans bus or whatever it is. So whilst they say it's kind of a tailor-made system, they're also saying you've got to expand your hours, which means people can access the pay-as-you-go issue. So how do we square that with the monies we've already talked about and kind of negotiated with the region?
CAO Louis?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bruno, it's a good question. And as you mentioned, we did have a chance to discuss this earlier because I had told council that the transit staff from the region wanted to attend tonight's meeting, but they're predisposed in Pelham and Fort Erie council meetings on the same subject. So I'll explain as best as I can from the city perspective, and it's I'll try not to go on too long, but there's a lot in my head that I have to get out here. So we've been working as 12 municipalities plus the region in Niagara for several years on amalgamated municipal transit, which is, you know, the big guys, St. Catharines, Wellington, Niagara Falls, as well as the small providers, Pelham, and that have a local community bus like us, Pelham, West Lincoln, Fort Erie, into what will eventually be a single entity, just like the regional police for Niagara. And it will be run. We will lose a little bit of autonomy. It's going to go to regional headquarters and be a regional department. We will have some involvement in the governance, and that's the report that's before council today. While this is happening, life goes on in the transit world, and that's why staff in Port Colborne city staff have had a report before you about bringing a better transit model to the city, and that's the on-demand. I think in the past it's been called dial-a-ride type service, where rather than stick to fixed routes, we can help those in our community by going off of the fixed routes and going either to centralized stops that are in a neighborhood where a person walks a short distance to a stop for a pre-arranged pickup, or sometimes, depending on the service, door to door. There's an increased cost to that, and I think that's what Councillor Bruno is referring to. So that cost is covered in the city's budget without a tax increase from transit reserves that we've built up over the year until such time as transit becomes regionalized. At that time, and this is what the councillor referred to, there's going to be a level up of the service. So if a bus stops for the night at 9 o'clock in Pelham and 10 o'clock in Niagara Falls at 11 o'clock in St. Catharines, for equity and fairness, they're all going to run until 11 o'clock. And that's where those extra 3,000 hours come in. That's weekends and holidays and late at night, where Port Colborne hasn't operated in the past. So the one caveat here, the difference between, say, a regional police model and the model that will end up, the best analogy is waste management. So waste management is a separate line on the city tax bill, and we pick and choose the services. Do we want extra collection downtown during the summertime when garbage cans are filling up faster? Do we want them to go into certain areas of town? And so there's almost a rate card or a menu that you can buy off. And I can see a future state where Port Colborne has, like, we don't want empty buses running through the city streets for a fee. We want to curtail or limit our hours. And I think that's a future discussion with regional staff, where we can sort of say, this is the services off the menu that the city of Port Colborne wants. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track here, Councillor Bruno, but one last thing I wanted to say is you will see this removed from the from the city levy. We will not pay for transit anymore, but our taxpayers in Port Colborne still pay through the tax bill to the region, because we have that split tax bill in Niagara. So I'll stop there. And Mr. Mayor, I hope I answered the question correctly.
Great, thank you. And just to correct you on one issue, it wasn't just a few years ago. Both Councillor Bodner and I sat on this committee back in the early 2000s. In fact, I took over Councillor Bodner's position when he became mayor. So this goes back to around 2003, 2004, that the region has been working on this with all the municipalities. So it is coming to fruition. And I think this plan, which has actually changed over the last number of months based on just things changing in the world as far as transit goes, I think it's a very good program. It came to Public Works last 2 weeks ago, and it was well received by the councillors that sit on that committee. So as the CAO stated, that it's kind of one of those where we can pick and choose what we want. And the fact is, with the on-demand, aside from our intermunicipal bus, which will continue, which is a regional bus at this time, with the on-demand, whether there won't be a bus just running down whatever street, Main Street or King Street or whatever it is, at 11 o'clock at night with nobody on it. With the on-demand, it's more economical for both the taxpayer, but actually more economical for the bus system. And the other issue is that with this program, we can cover 100% of Port Colborne. We're not even covering 100% of our urban section. So it's a way better program for the municipality and for the residents here. So I'm looking forward to this coming back to the region, and I'm looking forward to council supporting this tonight. Anything further, Councillor Bruno?
Nope, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Louis.
Good, thank you. Any further questions on this one? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Thank you, Council. Item 7.4, Lockview Park Concept Plans. That Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-223 be received for information. I have Councillor Bruno, Councillor Wells moving this. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I was just having attended the last part of the last community meeting on that. I was interested and pleased to see the connection back to the middle bridge, where it comes to a controlled intersection, crosswalk with appropriate safety lighting in that. And I was just wondering through you to Mr. Long, that will also be a benefit to Lakeshore School. And so I'm just wondering if we will be knocking on that door to provide some funding for that. It would greatly help the safety of those students who, as we all know, walk across the road there and then walk down into a ditch and cross a railroad track and walk up the other side. And that's really not the best situation for safety of our kids and those that attend there. So I'm just wondering if that's on your plate to seek some support and some dollars from the school board.
Mr. Long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, it is our intention to contact the Catholic School Board to make them aware of the project, but also to seek some partnerships, some potential funding. We haven't made that connection yet, but we have had those discussions internally about the need to contact the school. We envision that the new Lockview Park will get used quite often by the students at the school, as well as individuals and families in the neighborhood. So we want there to be a partnership between the city and the school board, and it is our intention to follow up with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. All set, Councillor? Councillor Wells?
Yes.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Long. A lot of our, I should say this, most of our parks and probably all of our parks don't have a winter feature or a winter utilization. Is there any consideration in some of this on this park to add in a winter feature or something that would draw people to the park during the winter?
Mr. Long?
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor, that has not been discussed. We can certainly review the public opinion data and input that we've received. It hasn't come up at our 2 open houses. I think it's a fair point, and it is one that our staff committee and our landscape architect can take a look at. We're also in the process of receiving input from the community on the 2 concept plans. So it is something we'll look at. I don't know whether sort of winter programming or a winter feature is best at this park or whether it should be at other parks, but it is something we can take.
Councillor?
That's my question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess to Mr. Long, first, let me just say that I really do appreciate the amount of effort that has gone forward to allowing the residents to have input. I think that was really wonderful. This is one of the few times I've seen this much outreach, and it was good to see. I did spend a little bit of time in this last week assuring people that the 2 options that were presented in this report are not the only options, and that is, these are not final drawings by any means, because there were a few concerns that have come up. Seniors are feeling a little bit left out there because there really isn't a feature that suits seniors well. If you take a look at even some of the shaded seating, it's more around playgrounds or basketball court. It doesn't lay out to seniors well. The 4 seasons aspect to it as well is something that did come up in conversations I've had. People are wondering where that is. They're not seeing parking. They're wondering where the parking is. Obviously the way this is going to be built, it will not allow Lock Street to be developed and go on through to John. It doesn't allow John Street to come over either. So that's unfortunate. It seems to take up the bottom, the actual southern face of the park only, and right up against Lakeshore, and it stops there. So it leaves the whole north end empty. You've got a lot of park to work with, and really I just feel that we're not getting much for that. And especially the seniors aspect, it's important to have that. So, but it does play well for a few little kids. If you've got little not toddlers, but if you've got young children, it'll probably fit well in there. And it will for people who want to use that court. But that's kind of where it ends. And I'd like to see, I personally had thought we'd see a lot more, but the community has spoken, and clearly they didn't bring it up. So maybe many of them haven't wanted to see it. I don't know, but we're yet to hear from the Seniors Advisory Committee, the Accessibility Committee, and the Active Transportation Committee. So once we've heard from them, there may be a lot more coming forward on that, and that may be helpful. But I am pleased with what's been done so far, and I'm hoping that council will also be able to weigh in on this more and give our ideas as what we'd like to see added to this, because lots is possible. At first, I wasn't at all happy about the Welland Street entrance, because I saw it being very much like what's happened with the trail. It became an escape route, which didn't really sit well with me, considering there really isn't anything on Welland Street. That's what really bothered me about it. But when you step back and look at it, it does provide that connectivity, and hopefully over time, we'll see it used in a really positive way. And I'm sure that we can find ways to support that. But all in all, I'm really happy with what's going on. I just wanted to give staff a real pat on the back for doing a great job on this. And I would hope that we have more conversations and develop this more, because I think that so much more is possible. I'd also like to see the surrounding development plan, because I really feel, and I've had this conversation with both you and Scott, I feel like this is kind of you dropped a square piece of material on my desk and said, okay, draw a park. But you haven't given me any context. There's nothing to say, how does that fit into this neighborhood? What's that neighborhood going to be? There's nothing to do that. So it's like there are no edges. And that's just not really how I feel that things should be done, but that's just my way of seeing it. In any case, I hope we will get to doing those things and have something that in the end really does become a little neighborhood hub, or, you know, a community park, how you want it. I don't think it's really a neighborhood park. It's more like a community park. But I'd like to see this become all that it can be. I think you're right, though. It will be heavily utilized by the adolescent group at mostly the students at Lakeshore. I think they're going to be the biggest users of this park. And that in and of itself is not exactly what we need for the community. We need more than that. So they should be one of the users, but we should be able to have other people in Port Colborne use that park and feel comfortable doing so. So there's all of that. But anyway, I just want to have that little say. And again, thank you for all the work. And that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And as always, please get your ideas into Mr. Long and his department. And those watching from the public, please get your ideas into Mr. Long's department, Economic Development and Tourism. And, you know, this is still open, and I'm sure Mr. Long can come back with some more of the issues that you spoke about, Councillor Desmarais, with regards to further development in that area, what we'd like to see. But please, Council, get those ideas into him. Worst thing to do is have staff bring a report back and nobody's ever said anything, and then you get all mad at them for not putting the stuff in there that you wanted, that you didn't tell them about. So please bring those ideas in. So thank you. Any further questions on this one? Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Worship. Just a question in regards to when this current survey that we're doing ends, just so that everybody can get their input as before it ends, and that can be considered.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Good question. Mr. Long.
Through you, Your Worship, to the Councillor, the survey, the public opinion survey, and the concept plans are part of a survey that will be up until midnight, August 31st. So it's going to be up this week and next week.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wells?
That's great. I just wanted to make sure everybody could hear that, and hopefully they can all put in as much input and contribution to what they want by then. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that's August 31st at midnight. Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, all in favor, please raise a hand. And that's carried. Okay, item 7.5. That Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-220 be received. The Council approve expanding the Niagara Gateway Economic Zone and Centre Community Improvement Plan CIP area as outlined in Appendix A to Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-220, and that the Economic Development Officer be directed to contact the Niagara Regions Council to request that they match the new boundaries. I have Councillors Bruno and Wells putting this on the table. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. When I first read this report, I was struck by the area that sort of is this mixture of 5 and 10-year programming grants. And to me, it sort of flies in the face of being equitable to business and industry in Port Colborne by trying to somehow, and I don't know the ins and outs of how the shaded areas were drawn, But it seems to me that we've gone a long way to adapting Gateway, which is canal and seaway related. As we know, we're in other discussions about lands abutting the canal and lands that we're going to be doing an industrial park that sits along canal lands and the seaport. And it seems to me that we have a canal-based strategy, as if you will, the spine going through Port Colborne. It would seem to me to be complementary and to be in our strategic direction to have the availabilities of these grants to be within a zone, and I'll use meters from the canal wall, both east and west. So rather than do a more patchwork or look at where somebody might or might not be growing, is I hate it when we get into situations where we draw a boundary and then somebody at the edge of the boundary, we say, well, let's grab them in there too. I would really like to see this 10-year program, which is the cream of the two programs offered, to be, and I'm going to use only because I was talking to Bram today and he talked about how far like JBL is off the canal wall. So I would love to use something like 350 meters on both the east and west of the canal, of the spine of this community, to be an area where everybody quite simply, can understand that if you're in that zone, you can apply for a 10-year grant. I think it's not trying to pick winners and losers in what area of the city, but being very clear, very succinct, very focused that we want the regional plans to complement the city strategy. And I think by making it simple, it allows our business and industries to know that if they're in this zone, they can partake in the lucrative plan that is before you. And rather than just tweak it and extend it, I think it would speak well at the region to say, they're all about the Seaway, the growth project, the Gateway. And so let's up our game, but make it synonymous with where we see growth and what we're doing as a strategic direction. So I don't know, through you to Bram, if you could go back with that and if council approves it, to say we have a very focused plan. It's very clean. It's succinct. It's easy to follow. It's got dimensions to it. And that's the area we want the Gateway Zone to qualify for the 10-year incentive.
So, Councillor, if you're looking for an amendment, what you're asking is staff to include from our southern boundary, which is Lake Erie, to the northern boundary of the city, 350 meters out from the canal edge.
Yes, thank you for that motion.
Okay, I could get what you were saying, it came out the longer way. So do you want to put that amendment on the floor?
I would definitely like to put that amendment on.
So
Councillor, I'd like Bram's comment on it if I could.
Okay, so I'll get it on the floor, then I'll go to staff. So Councillor Bruno is asking that the report include from the southern end of Port Colborne, which is Lake Erie boundary, to the northern boundary, which is the Welland boundary, on 350 meters back from the east side of the canal wall or slope, because some doesn't have a wall all the way, and the same on the west side of the city. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Desmarais. Mr. Cotton, do you want to comment on Councillor Bruno's amendment?
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. I believe that is an excellent amendment to the report that's been put forward. I'd be more than happy with council's approval to take that forward to the Region Economic Development to the Economic Development and Planning Committee of the region. for their comments and recommendation and approval.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wells, question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to through to Brian. Maybe it may not be a right question to ask him, but it may be better asked to planning. The issue or the concern I have is that, first of all, I'll address it with what's proposed, is that there are mixed zones within that area. Unlike what's on the east side, being in the GI zone, there is both heavy and light industrial zones within the identified area for expansion. If we do expand that even further south, it's going to include multiple different zones that are involved in there, which could be a planning issue. I was just wondering if that has been taken into consideration in regards to the expansions or future proposed expansions of the GI zoning area.
Mr. Cotton?
So my understanding is that because through you, Worship, to the councillor or to council, my understanding is that it only applies to industrial development and industrial zoned areas. So therefore, it wouldn't encompass, it wouldn't have any it wouldn't influence residential or any of those other areas. It would only impact the industrial zoned areas.
Councillor?
Again, industrial zoned areas are not all equal. For example, light and heavy industrial, there's a significant difference between what takes place there. Again, it was just something that I would raise just out of my curiosity.
Mr. Cott?
If the councillor wishes, I can certainly go back and come back with an updated report in 1 month's time from now, if it's a question that is a make or break on the decision-making process.
Councillor?
It's not a make and break. As I said, it was a curiosity of mine. I just didn't want us to get into a planning issue where we've gone ahead and changed the zoning to a GI and that impacted a light industrial zone or a neighbor to a light industrial zone. It was just trying to look forward just to see if this could create any problems in that area.
Yeah, Councillor, because we won't be changing any zoning. What it will do is allow those that are properly zoned under these programs to actually apply now. Whereas Councillor Bruno said you could have one piece of property being able to apply, but the guy next door, because he's outside of that zone, can't apply. So if it's a brownfield development, one brownfield could get built on and get the benefits of the granting program, where the guy next door who wants to do a brownfield can't get it. But it doesn't change any zoning. So in those distances that Councillor Bruno brought out, it's only those that could apply that qualify for the program. So they have to be zoned properly already, and that's already in our zoning bylaws. So it's not changing anything. We're not changing anything. All we're allowing is more people to apply for different portions of these grants by expanding the zones. Councillor?
Okay, I understand that and I appreciate that. I was just looking at one of our 6575/30/18 zoning bylaw and how they identify these areas, and the areas are identified as GI. They're not identified as a breakdown of the different zones. So my concern was that if we're looking at this and then re-identifying these zones as all GI, then we may lose some of that differentiation between the zones within that area. That was my only concern.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? So this is to the amendment. before we vote on the motion as amended? All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, council. Now to the main motion as amended. Any further questions on that? All in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Thank you, council. And thank Mr. Cotton and Mr. Long for that one. So item 7.6, the Corporate Services Department Report 2021-219, 2021 Beach Operations Update, be received as information. I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu moving this. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Director Bowles. Good reports, good numbers. I like them. They seem to be very positive. I just hope they keep going. One question for you, though, is that in the report, there is no indication of any impact related to beach closures. Have you noticed, or has there been any difference between when Cedar Bay or Nickel Beach have been identified by the region as close to swimming? I'm just curious about that.
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, it's a good question. We have been pretty lucky, I think, and I stand to be corrected, but just following it anecdotally, the weekends at Nickel Beach, we've been pretty lucky to have them clear sailing on the beaches, and we remain quite full there. Definitely at Cedar Centennial area, there has been a number of days that have had, I think, some recommendation not to swim by the region. Now, because our numbers are so much higher at Nickel versus Cedar, we really haven't experienced a major change or a flow between the two, but it is something we do monitor. I can say to council, I was just reviewing our budgets to actual today, and as of August 23rd, so as of this last weekend, we have hit our funding target for the beaches. So the people have certainly been interested in our beaches and continue to go, and we do point them to the direction to continue to monitor water quality. But we have been quite lucky this year with Nickel Beach specifically. Has been pretty clean, and it's been pretty has received, I think, a good review, at least from the water quality report for most of the year.
Great. Councillor Wells?
That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got one question. I sent it in to Director Bowles earlier. The report talks about some of the enhancements that should be that are needed, or for Nickel Beach would be completely funded through the Valet Community Improvement Fund. I just asking if Mr. Director Bowles could explain a little bit about the Vail Community Improvement Fund and how it works and what it is.
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to council, we've alluded to it in a couple reports, and I think one of the most recent ones when we got approval to extend the lease at the Nickel Beach. Basically, working with Ballet and talking to them, they're willing and they're looking to invest in the city, and they want to invest in the beach specifically and in a couple other projects in the city. We've been exchanging some communication. They've called it the Community Fund, and we look forward to certainly bringing forward some projects to council and to Valley as staff that they can consider funding for this project. I guess getting into too many of the specifics when Valley is actually kind of developing it as they ask us questions, it's kind of hard to answer everything. It's not like it's a government grant that they post it on a website and they say, these are your 5 conditions to apply for. We've been having these ongoing conversations, and I think council may be aware that these conversations, I think, have been kind of happening for the last 2 or more years with Ballet on this fund. So we are, as staff, putting forward projects that council has already or having conversations with them about projects that council has already been moving forward on. Another project that we were talking to them about is Lockview Park. So you just saw a report about doing Lockview Park, and we were talking to them about not only with improving the beach, but potentially doing and helping fund Lockview Park in that area would probably be a very welcome project for council to hear a potential funding source for. So that would be the other kind of projects that we're talking about, all projects that council's already heard about and maybe looking to fund anyways, but having a partner like Valet on those projects, we're hoping that through continued conversations, we can bring a strong partnership and bring it back to council for some consideration on.
Great, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Director Bowles. I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. And that's carried. Item 7.7, that Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-215 be received for information. This is in regards to signage renewal strategy. I have Councillor Bruno moving that, and if I can ask Councillor Danch to second that. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Since sending that in, I've had my questions answered today, so I'm fine.
Great, thank you. Any further questions on this? Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, either to Luke or to Manager Long. I think this is great. Is there any, or could you describe what type of public input will be open on this strategy, on this program?
Mr. Rowe?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, I'll maybe start, and my colleague may have some further comments. We're certainly open to council direction on this. I think our intention was to make this a kind of an internal corporate initiative. Luke Rowe has, as the report indicates, worked on an inventory of our current signage, what we have, what needs to be replaced, what we don't have, and that we are engaging and working with our colleagues in other departments, such as corporate communications, to ensure we're meeting the branding guidelines. We're also working with our colleagues in parks and recreation and engineering and public works. So I guess to answer the question from the councillor, we have not included a public engagement component. That being said, I know that I have received a few emails from members of the community asking for signs that are important to them, and that's something we need to take a look at. So I'm certainly open to comments from you or the CAO or others.
Councillor?
As to how we can include
Through you, Your Worship, I have also received suggestions or recommendations, specifically one for the Cedar Bay Park, a sign down at the Vimy Ridge Road and Pinecrest intersection where there are no signs that point toward the park. So that was one that I told the residents of the area that I would bring to your attention. And I think from the perspective of public input is just that if we've identified some of this, if it's on our website, then they can go to it and see if their area is being addressed or not. I'm not asking or expecting to see anything heavily in the way of public engagement on this, just something where someone can refer to see if what they believe is necessary is there. That's all.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Good suggestion. If Mr. Long and Mr. Rowe can speak to communications, putting something on our website about signage, that'd be appreciative. Any further questions, councillors? I think we can take that as direction. Councillor Wells, is that okay?
Perfect.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Danch.
And I might be a little late on this one, and I know it's a signage issue. We have this very tired sign when you come into Port Colborne on Highway 3 at the old A&W that says the little city that can. And I know what it says because I've been looking at it forever. Not sure whose property it's on, and I've had calls about it, and either we refurbish it or we should have it removed because it really does kind of make us look bad. So if we could throw that out there for those people, please look after that.
Yeah, so that's a private property sign that was put up by a private individual a number of years ago. That property's been sold. That is not a city sign. It was put up by Mr. Castor quite a while ago. But what we can do is, through staff, if Mr. Louis can contact planning tomorrow and have our staff talk to the new owners and have them, ask them to remove it. So maybe once they get their development in, which I believe is in front of planning right now, maybe we can ask them to put something there, but we can ask them to at least remove that sign. It's gotten old, but it is a private sign. CAO, is that fine? Okay, good, get the thumbs up. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried, thank you. Next is item 8.1. I'll have Councillor Bruno move that, Councillor Bodner second it. It's with regards to a letter from the City of Welland that the Council of the City of Welland receives for information report. There's a number further, and it has to do with Niagara Regional Council maintain the existing grants and incentive programs as detailed in this report. And further, the Welland City Council is supportive of adding additional financial incentives for affordable and rental housing. And further, that the City of Welland Council requests the City Clerk forward a copy of this report to the Niagara Region and all municipalities within the Niagara Region for information and support. I'll go to Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I pulled it because I think that certainly we have done we've been privileged to take advantage of these programs. I think just earlier tonight, or recently, we talked about the other report on the 5 and 10 year reports on grants. And I think it's important that we also send a similar resolution from Port Colborne forward. What I wanted to know, and perhaps you could enlighten us, is this speaks very sort of all-encompassing when it says existing grants and incentive programs. And I didn't know if what we just talked about, the canal corridor or the industrial lands or particularly contaminated lands, is there a way to look at potentially strengthening those? And what I don't know is the sort of all-encompassing statement in number 2. So, I think the housing market and the growth that's happening in Niagara, I'm not so sure that those programs that we need more programs strengthening subdivision growth, and maybe there aren't any anyways. So I really don't know what all the existing grants are. And I'm happy to keep them, but I'd love to maybe refocus them that maybe give more bang for the buck in the areas that we want to. I don't know if that's a question for you, for planning, for Bram, but it was just one of the things over and above endorsing this that I wouldn't mind knowing about.
Thanks, Councillor, because this came up when I was away on holidays, but I did speak to a number of my colleagues from the region. And in reality, you are right. I'll call them those greenfield type grants. I think Council's pretty unanimous on not keeping those anymore. But the brownfield redevelopment, the SNP program, which talks about facade improvements in downtown cores. Anybody can drive down either Main Street in Port Colborne or our downtown core on King and Clarence and West, where businesses have taken advantage of that. Part of the SNP is some waterfront redevelopment on shoreline protection that the region is looking at. Some of the councillors want to get rid of that grant. I'm in favor of keeping it, as most of the communities that are along the Niagara River, Lake Ontario, and Lake Erie are in favor of that grant. There's a number of others that they've been talking about, but I think what Welland's really hit the nail on the head is that they want to include the affordable rental housing in there that really wasn't there before. But the grants that they've been talking about actually are those that actually garner development in a community on properties that quite frankly, unless there's granting, may never be developed. We're not talking about going into a nice greenfield where you're going to put up a 500 house development. Those are pretty much gone by the wayside because those people are coming down here now. There is no incentive to bring them here because they're here already. But for old sites that have buildings torn down or that are just sitting vacant, get some incentives because quite frankly, a lot of them will may get you a little bit of tax dollars today, but once a new development gets on there, it can bring in hundreds of thousands in both tax coffers, being municipalities and the regions. So that's what we're talking about here. So that's really where it's going. But Councillor, we can, if you want Mr. Cotton to bring back a further report on this, we can ask him to do that if that's what you wish.
As long as we don't miss the dealing with this at the region, yes.
It is coming up.
I don't know if there's a deadline down there that this is going to be voted on whether to reinstitute or to drop some. I just wouldn't want to miss the deadline without our support, but if that can be accomplished, yes, I would like Mr. Cotton to do that.
Yeah, it's this Thursday, Councillor.
Then let's get her in.
Okay, Mr. Louie?
I think.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Bruno, and I guess with maybe a question at the end to Gary Long. I believe this is the SNP incentive programs, all the ones that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor. My recollection, and I'm looking through my notes, and I don't expect the councillor to remember if I don't remember as well. We brought a staff report to council a few meetings ago with a draft letter from the mayor, and council did approve that report, did approve that letter, and we did send it. Bram Cotton sent it on over the mayor's signature, not his own, to the region about the incentive programs. But that would not have included the additional items that Welland included here. So the best path forward, I think, is to go back and read the minutes of that meeting, but also to support Welland's request, and that will lend our municipal support to their additional, use my hand here, it's on screen, additional items that they've included in that correspondence item that's before you.
Great, thanks, Mr. Louie. Councillor?
Excellent strategy and gets it in on time and covers what we didn't cover off. Love it.
Perfect, thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Long has a comment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to build on the CAO's comments, I know my colleague Bram Cotton, who had the lead on this, he has been in touch with the clerk's office at the region, and he has confirmed that the mayor's letter regarding the city of Port Colborne's position on incentives is on the agenda, the regional council agenda for this Thursday. So we appreciate council's support. This council has been very active. I did watch quite a bit of the regional debate on this a couple of weeks ago, and I think there's a lot of support throughout the region to keep the programs intact, if not expand them. So I think it bodes well for where we'd like to go as a city, as well as the future of these programs.
Great, thank you. Mr. Louie, anything to add?
Well, I maybe spoke too soon when I let the council member off the hook, because the clerk has slipped me a virtual note here that says that Councillor Bruno was the chair of the meeting where this took place.
That's
when I was too busy being chair to
Perfect explanation. Perfect.
Good. Okay, council, any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Well, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, council. 8.2 is a letter from the city of Stratford. At their June 28th, 2021 regular council meeting, Stratford City Council adopted a resolution petitioning the province to immediately take steps to replace gas-powered electrical generation with non-carbon-based sustainable alternatives. A copy of the resolution is attached for your consideration. We kindly request your support and endorsement. I have Councillor Wells moving this. If I can get Councillor Danch to second it. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. More a comment than anything else. The future's upon us. Our Prime Minister has identified that the internal combustion engine will be gone by 2035. I think for us to support and endorse this would be a step in the right direction. And so I'm suggesting that we do so.
Okay. Councillor Danch, is that all right to, we continue to second that?
Mixed feelings. You know, is a gasoline engine going to be gone by 2035? I don't know. I don't know if I want to second that. I think I'll just step back on that one. Thank you.
Yep, that's fine. So, Councillor Bagu, you'll second that? Okay, so I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu to second the amendment that supports the City of Stratford. Further questions? Comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, item 16. There are no motions this evening. Does any councillor have a notice of motion? Seeing none. We have our minutes of boards and committees, and there are none this evening. We are into item 19, our bylaws. We have bylaw 19.1, 19.2, and 19.3. If I could have councillors Bodnar and Wells move those. Are there any questions to the bylaws? All in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. On to item 20, confidential items. Confidential reports will be distributed under separate discussion, and I'll have Councillors Bagu and Cleolough move that Council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Item 20.1, minutes of the closed session portion of the July 12th, 2021 Council meeting. Item 20.2, Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-225 concerning 12 King Street. Item 20.4, Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-218 concerning sale of vacant lot on Nickel Street. And item 20.5, Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-222 concerning surplus lots on Borden Avenue, all pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. And item 20.3, Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-217 concerning Lockview Park ownership pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and 2392F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. All those in favor, Council, please raise their hand. That's carried. It is now 9:22. We will meet in camera at 9:32. So once you leave here, please come back in at 9:32. And this portion of the council meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Council.